Howdy, Jill. How's it going?
Hey, Pete, how are you?
I'm super fabulous. I'm so pumped to have you here today. Everyone, thank you for joining us for this session on pipeline generation and rethinking pipeline generation to make it customer centric. I'm very excited to have the SaaS queen, Jill Rowley, here with me today. Um, thank you everyone in the MSP community for joining our Revenue Excellence Summit. I think pipe gen is pretty top of mind for a lot of people these days, so I'm very excited for us to talk about that today. But before we get into that, just for folks who may not be familiar, Jill, I would love for you to maybe introduce yourself, give folks a little bit of, for folks who have been hiding under a rock, give folks some context on what you've spent your time doing, why you know a little bit about, just a little bit about marketing, just a little bit about selling, just a little bit about all the go-to-market stuff. Maybe you can kind of share with that, share with folks that.
Yeah, so Pete, it's tough because I have a 30-year career,
Oh,
and
I don't think we have that much
yeah,
time.
and we definitely don't have enough time. So let's just start with I am a businesswoman first. I went to UVA undergraduate business
Business,
school.
business.
Business. I'm a business woman,
Mm,
and I now say I majored in customer and I minored in go to market, because we have to start with the customer and understanding who your customer is, what they're trying to accomplish. How can you uniquely and differentiated deliver value? So majored in customer. Last 24 years have been in B2B SaaS and Salesforce. First 100 employees, Eloqua, joined them in 2002. Employee number 13 was there for 10 years, um, as an IC, individual quota carrying sales rep, selling to marketing, hence why I'm a sales professional trapped in a
that's
marketer's
right.
body. Yeah. And I was on the NASDAQ when we took it public. It was an FML moment when 4 months later we were acquired by Oracle.
Boom, boom,
And then there's
boom.
a lot of things that happened after that. But why don't we get into the conversation and
Yeah,
we'll touch on some of the
but
experiences I've had.
but I think the really important thing for folks to know is that, to Jill's point about being, majoring in customer and minoring go to market, she has a lot of experience with selling. She has a lot of experience in the marketing martech landscape, having sold and been an evangelist and a mouthpiece for Eloqua, one of the primary innovators along with Marketo in the marketing automation space, kind of creators of marketing automation platforms, which is why she knows a thing or two about these sort of things. I'm pumped to be talking pipe gen with you, Jill. Folks, for people who don't know me, my name is Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. For people who don't know, Atrium makes sales performance management software that helps sales organizations measure, manage, and improve the performance of their sales teams by honestly automating a lot of the sales performance management stuff that like frontline managers and reps have a tendency to like maybe not do, maybe kind of avoid, but instead you can actually want to make sure that they're doing it in order to drive high performance. That's what I think about all day long. I'm also one of the founders of Modern Sales Pros, which I think probably the people who are here today have heard about before. So that's a little bit about me. But I think like what we want to talk about here today really is kind of like pipe gen. And I think there's a lot of kind of like wobbliness happening in pipe gen world right now that we want to talk about. And like, you know, honestly, I think first what would be really great is to talk a little bit about like why pipeline generation is so wobbly right now. And like, to quote like a LinkedIn blowhard, why pipe gen is broken. Um, and because I think that there's a lot of people who are like trying to do the same plays that have worked maybe like 2 years ago or 4 years ago or 6 years ago or 8 years ago, and they're finding that it's just like not working right now. I mean, I guess like first and foremost, as somebody who comes from a marketing automation background and of course sales engagement software like the Outreach and the Sales Lofts of the worlds are kind of like baby marketing automation, kind of like mini marketing automation. Those really have just the notion spray and pray of sales engagement software, loading up a list from ZoomInfo or loading up a list from Apollo or your favorite data vendor and just kind of like, firing off thousands of emails. That really seems to like not be working anymore. What has broken, like what's broken outbound? And then like maybe I'd like to talk about like what's making inbound harder as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first reason why everybody on this call has broken pipe gen is because they didn't major in customer, and they're incredibly focused on their go to market and not looking at it reverse engineering through the lens of the customer. So that's before any tactics or channels come into play. That's number one. Is reverse engineering customer back. If I go back to my speech from 2013, it's the same stuff, right? Back then it was every seller is doing the call, email, call, email, call, email play, and every buyer is doing the ignore, delete, ignore, delete, ignore, delete. This is 2013. You can probably find a recording on it online. So I kind of feel like sick in my stomach that
I'm
we're
trying
still
to see how many dismissed calls I have right there.
Exactly. And now it's LinkedIn. Reps are hitting you up on LinkedIn. Most of the invites are generic. And if it's not like blank, I should say. And if it's not blank, it's generic. And if it's not blank or generic and you accept the invite, then quickly thereafter, it's a pitch. And look, buyers don't want the bullshit anymore. And it's a war on attention and a crisis of trust. Mm-hmm. And good luck your email, call, email, LinkedIn, DM, pitch working to get anybody's attention. Nobody's gonna unmute to respond to your influx of junk.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
I just think too, look, we're going to talk about Nearbound, and we got a good old Nearbound book here.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, Nearbound. And so the thinking is that we've moved from the how economy to the who economy. And the how economy is when buyers went to Google to find solutions, and that they compared product specs, the information, like where they could get their information, from whom was key. Companies, were really the source of the information, and the best content, inbound won. The who economy, buyers are asking who they trust. And they are really trying to understand who else uses it. Like, who are their peers that they respect that are using whatever they're trying to evaluate. Relationships are back to being key. I think they always have been. And companies are really partnering with the source of the information, right? So it's not necessarily creating all of this, but it's partnering with those who your buyers already trust, who are actually putting the information out. We've gone from, like, we live in a networked world, and so it isn't the best product. It isn't the best even go to market. It's the best networked ecosystem. And that's really where we're seeing this shift from the how to the who.
Yeah, and I think another thing, so we talked a little bit about outbound there, and one of the things I speak on a lot is the kind of gaps in sales performance in the market right now. And typically when new technology shows up, it kind of goes through a life cycle of deployment, and then like second order impacts start showing up. Like, good example of this would be sales engagement software, email automation, et cetera. um, kind of like fishing with dynamite initially, but unfortunately, when it gets deployed broadly across the market, inboxes kind of get disastrous. And then there was a second order impact where now you have a bunch of junior sellers who have come up in a world where the prospecting behavior was loading a list, hit and go, and then waiting for the replies to follow. So now that's going to have to unwind, which is natural. And I think the same thing happened on the inbound side as well. In that originally there was these wonderful things. They were called search engines. They did a good job of distilling and bringing to the top the most compelling content that was available, like blog posts, etc. A lot of the marketing automation folks out there, especially the second wave of marketing automation in the form of like HubSpot, did a good job of popularizing the importance of creating this content. But then of course the problem is that everyone got really good at that, and like lo and behold, the first 2 pages of Google now are interchangeable listicles of whatever, what, like SEO optimized whatever, as relates to the use case that somebody's searching for, and it all kind of like looks the same, and there's not a lot of signal in there. It's like, man, these first 20 pages here are all the same. Geez, geez Louise, I'm not really going to pay attention to this, right? And so I think that your point is well taken around like buyers want to have signal, right? Like what is the problems that I should care about most? Like what should be my top priority versus my second versus my third versus like whatever. And then within that, what are the solutions to those problems? What are the potential, potential vendors that I can use in order to solve those problems? And so I think one of the things that we're observing is that the signal now can come from people, right? From other people that they're that they may know or maybe don't know, are reputable, right? That there's still signal for people to make judgments. And so I think this is when you and I were talking about this, we were talking about Nearbound, and there's kind of two conceptions of Nearbound. There's who is near the customer, and then there is which customers are near to you, right? You being the vendor in question. And so I think what we want to do is we want to talk about like the first bucket first of who is near to your customer, who has their ear,
Yeah.
And how can we leverage them as a mechanism by which to help customers understand that like this is a problem that they have and they ought to solve it, and then that your solution is one to do that. And like the oldest school version of this is probably like analysts, right? Like doing a good job making sure that you're briefing the Gartners and the Forresters and the what have you of the world. But that's also very historically, that was like very heavy. There's like these analysts are smart and thoughtful and put together good research, but they can only interact with so many vendors at any given point in time, and they can only interact with so many customers on a recurring basis or what have you. And so that's really kind of like democratized more through kind of like things like review sites and what have you. So like I think that's like fairly known, and making sure that folks are kind of present there. But there's other places that are near to customers, whether that's like social or communities or what have you. And I was wondering if we could like maybe talk about that a little bit, of making sure that those folks are talking about the problem that your solution solves, and then also what this like your solution. Do you have kind of perspectives on that, maybe like as relates to influencers on social, and then maybe also like dark marketing, dark web, dark social communities, et cetera, et cetera?
Let me pull out my
Uh-oh.
content from 2014, 15.
Oh, is there
Yeah.
dust on it?
I mean, this is ridiculous. Like, we're talking about stuff that, like, this is new. Everybody's talking about the new buyer. You guys totally were asleep for a decade, and you were all reading Aaron Ross's book, and everyone thought that was the Bible of SaaS sales. And I thought it was pretty shitty from like the minute it was published. And now that here's the thing, once everybody's doing the best practice, it is no longer the right practice. And so you got to think about this again. Think about majoring in customer and then minoring in go to market. And I was Serious Decisions best salesperson. And if y'all don't know who Serious Decisions is, you're not old enough. And go in like SIR, IUS Decisions. And they were the research consulting analyst firm that actually created the demand waterfall, the MQL to SAL to SQO. They are the ones who created the framework, the model, the benchmarks that funnels are designed and optimized for. Well, guess what? They're no longer around. Forrester acquired them. And by the way, Serious Decisions was the guys who were at Gartner said the Gartner way is so traditional and outdated, and they're not focused on sales and marketing. They're just selling to IT. And so look, things change and they constantly change. And so you got to be able to see around corners, and you have to be willing to say, okay, I know this isn't working the way it used to. What's next? And the way that you find what's next is you study the buyer and the customer. Make sense, Pete? So let's talk about
you major in customer. Yeah.
Major in customer. Let's talk about the fact that when I was at Serious Decisions events, because here's the thing, why was I their best salesperson? Because when I was trying to sell marketing automation to a non-sophisticated, not data-driven, not like metrics-oriented, not process, they had to go get education. And who was going to educate them? Serious Decisions. So then as Serious sees me sending all of these like marketing leaders, demand gen, marketing ops, product marketing, and then fast forward to them actually expanding into sales and me sending all of these people to Serious Decisions, I earned their attention. And when I'm at the Serious Decisions conference, I'm not sitting at the booth like waiting for someone to come by who just wants like the little like, you know, Eloqua.
You're in the bar and at the club.
I used to drink 9 years ago. I quit. So there will be no like that. That's the old Jill.
You can have mocktails, right? But you're with the people, with the people, right? With the customers, right?
Yeah.
Wherever
but
they're at.
Where I am before I go to the bar, I'm actually in the frickin' sessions. I'm in the sessions learning what my buyers are learning so that when I talk to my buyers, I sound more like them than a pushy, selly, let me get you drunk salesperson. It literally is like businesswoman with customer acumen and sales acumen, right? So the idea, and this is, gosh, wind back the clock to freaking 24 years ago when I started in sales. It's be where your buyers are, be offline, online all the time, be visible and valuable to your buyers, right? If you want customer advocacy, you be the best advocate of and for your customers. Share content that is about your customers. Share content, try to get your customers on podcasts. Everyone's doing this now, or maybe not everyone, but we at Eloqua, and then I was at Marketo too. So I used to call them Marcrapo. I went to Marketo in 2017, 18. I reported to the CEO, and I you know what I was there for? I was there to bring in a seat into the exec meetings, into the boardrooms, because I was in the board meetings with Vista Private Equity, and I represented the lens of the customer, the lens of the ecosystem, the lens of the broader community, the lens of the market. And that's what I was there to do, because I was the Ella Queen, I was Jilliqua, I was the mother of marketing automation. So I knew the market, but more importantly, the market knew me, and I had earned the trust of the market. And so that was like, she who is nearest to the customer wins. She who stays nearest to the customer wins. So going back to how do we get nearer to the customer, We can do that by getting nearer to those who are nearest to the customer.
Yeah.
That could be communities that they're part of. It could be analysts. It could be consulting firms. It could be people of influence or influencers, subject matter experts, thought leaders. And it can also be your partners. If you're a tech company, guess what? You're not the only software your customer is buying.
Mhm.
Most of your customers have Frankenstacks with too many pieces of disconnected, disjoining, disparate pieces of tech. And so customers want things that are more integrated, more interoperable. And so, from a tech perspective, what tech does your customer use? Map out your customer's ecosystem. What other pieces of tech do they use? What services providers, agencies, consulting firms do they work with? What communities do they belong to? What podcast do they listen to? So, literally map out the sphere of influence of your customer and figure out where the hell are you and why aren't you there?
Right. Yeah, and I think there's a bunch of like to kind of reduce this to tactics. I think first and foremost, like finding out where folks kind of hang out, and obviously there's been a substantial proliferation of communities. I think there's kind of two components to it. There's the LinkedIn is kind of the centralized like meta community, if you will, and then there's like verticalized ones that are present for different, areas of practice. Modern Sales Pros kind of being a good example of that. I think when it comes to the communities, it's how can you engage with those communities? Can you make, like, a good example of this was early on with MSP. SalesLoft did a phenomenal job of getting lots and lots of their customers into Modern Sales Pros. There's a gentleman named Don Otvos, who's a stalwart in the MSP community, and has worked at a variety of different revenue stack companies. But he was amazing at getting vocal SalesLoft champions and advocates into Modern Sales Pros, such that whenever there was a conversation that popped up regarding sales engagement or what have you, boom, there were a bunch of like, stoked SalesLoft advocates in the room there. So that's like one way that you can do that. Obviously, there's like, commercial ways that you can be involved, et cetera. But I think for the most part, these communities, what they want is they like members, right? They want people who are going to be members in their community. And so if you can bring your customers to bear, it's kind of not dissimilar to the notion of like having your customers come and provide, G2 or Trust Radius reviews. But in this case, it's conversation in like the Google group or the Slack channels or what have you. And then over on the LinkedIn side,
I was an early MSP person.
of course you
And
were.
one of the things that I, really respected was the no pitching. And you literally would kick people out because they were in there being douchey salespeople and, pitching
But
product.
but
And
your but the customers could speak to it, right? The
that's
customers
exactly
could
what
speak.
Don did. It's like
Yeah.
he's not in there representing SalesLoft. He's in there getting customers to be the voice.
Mhm.
Because listen, VOC, voice of the customer, gotcha. How about VOC? The bigger VOC was, which is voice of the community.
Mhm.
And so really like understanding what the voice of the community is and making sure your voice of the customer is in that community, because community is broad. It's more broad.
Yeah.
So I was recommending your founder led selling to someone like 3 days ago. Actually, what's today? I don't even know what today is. I have no freaking clue what today is. But a few days ago, I was recommending that because you know what he did? He asked me, he's like this neuroscientist kind of guy, and he's got this new software and he's looking to hire like a salesperson. He doesn't founder led selling. He like,
You need
mm.
to you
And
need to help him.
well, and he sent me a LinkedIn profile of someone he was talking to. And I immediately went back and like, she actually is an individual contributor. She has zero domain expertise, and she's a waste of your time to even have the conversation. I can qualify her out. Nothing against her. And so he texted me and he said, within 5 minutes of the conversation, she said she's not the right person. And I had already sent him your stuff. And I think he read your stuff the way that I read his stuff. It's gobbledygook. It doesn't make sense. He doesn't know go to market. I don't know neuroscience. So anyways, those things hold true. Those things
Yeah.
that founder-led selling holds true today.
But I think the important thing in this case is that you were close to the customer and you're able to provide a recommendation there. And I think that it's like, how can you like what we need to do from a marketing and a sales standpoint is think about how we can facilitate this and operationalize this. Now, from a marketing standpoint, we kind of like what Dawn was doing is Dawn was doing God's work for the Sales Loft marketing organization in that case. But as individual sellers, that where we have to look after our own pipeline as well, our own pipeline generation, there's something there as well, which is how can we use our own buyers, right? And mine them as an example for referrals, right? So if we have highly successful customers that we've sold and we've ensured that they got to success and that they're getting the utility out of the solution and they're happy, well, that's the point at which we can sit with them together and go through their LinkedIn network and identify potential potential suspects there. But again, using them as someone who's near to the customer. Another thing I wanted to kind of ask about, because I think that people get a little confused about this as relates to LinkedIn, because there's being a voice that your customer respects, and then there's being a voice that your peers respect. And I think, and it's good to be both. But I think the challenge is that a lot of the times the things that people see is they see the former, right? Excuse me, they see the latter. They see people who are authoritative as like say you're a seller, right? And they see people who are authoritative with respect to selling, right? Or sales leaders or what have you. And then they think, hey, that's how I should be authoritative, as I should be. But with the exception of people who sell to sellers, right? To sell to sales leaders, right? That's generally not going to be the case. Like no one's going to care. If you sell to marketers, as an example, if you sell marketing automation software or what have you, then being highly active and vocal and in the comments of conversations about sales compensation plans or rep onboarding or what have you, that isn't actually going to positively impact your pipeline generation versus participating in conversations about the funnel or like marketing attribution or marketing analytics or like new school marketing automation or different channels or what have you. That's where your buyer is, right? And so if you as a seller or as a sales leader or what have you want to be authoritative and be near to your customer, you need to be near to your customer and not near to your peers, but near to your customers, and recognize that like it's uncomfortable and it requires learning, like as you were talking about earlier, Jill, like being in the sessions and learning about stuff, like reading a book on whatever the subject matter is that you're selling into.
Quantum
But that's
computing, talent
whatever.
management,
It's going to
whatever
be
it is.
it's going to be highly differentiated, and then moreover highly differentiated from all the other sellers, and then moreover all the other kind of like social stuff that you're doing that isn't customer centric is like you're just wasting your time. It's awful.
That's
Right?
what you do to up your game in your craft of sales, right? So good, learn about sales. But if you're selling into HR, then you sure as hell
Perfect.
better know who Josh Person is, because
Right.
he is the leading authority on all things HR. And so
That's right.
really, instead of just thinking about your customers and engaging with them on LinkedIn or wherever they are, think about who the authorities are, who are the subject matter experts, who are the researchers, who are the journalists, who are the of the people who influence, right? The people who influence your customers. If you're showing up and engaging with Josh Berson's content, your customer's going to be like, she's got it.
Who's this Jill lady? Josh Berson is responding to this Jill lady, and then you get in a conversation with the VP of talent acquisition of XYZ, and then slide into the DMs and off you go. Maybe you got a little opportunity there. Look at that, right?
You send a piece of Josh's content to that VP of talent management, and not just the piece of content, but it could be, hey, I was listening to this episode of Josh's podcast, and I've learned so much from you. I think, why aren't you on the podcast? And so the superpower is the connector as well. And it's not just connecting people to other people, it's connecting people to resources, connecting people to opportunities. So I was basically a part-time recruiter in terms of, if I had a customer who was looking for a new gig, I knew people who were hiring, and those who hadn't bought my product, maybe I'd be like, oh, Megan Eisenberg, she's the Supreme Ella Queen. Megan, why don't you talk to the company that's not using Eloqua? And I know the first thing you're going to do is put Eloqua in. I did this at Marketo too. And and now I'm on my second lap around the track with HubSpot as an advisor. And so I could move people from the Eloqua ecosystem into the HubSpot ecosystem. I just had a conversation with a ProServe company who's been all Salesforce, all in on the Salesforce ecosystem. And I said, hey, look, HubSpot is not who you think it was. They have 6 hubs: marketing, sales, CS, commerce, content, ops. It's a platform with 1,700 tech integration partners, and it isn't cobbled, right? It's not through a bunch of acquisitions, like acquiring Pardot and trying to sell it like it's a B2B product, and Pardot is B2B, but Salesforce anyways. So it's this, I know that probably on the call, they're looking for more tactics and brass tacks, and that's fine. I can get into that as well. But if we're not thinking, here's the thing, linear doesn't exist. We don't have this customer journey, this buyer's journey that is linear, that we internally, because we're majoring in go to market and not customer, right? We've got to understand that this is not linear, it's networked.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that the notion of placing customers is a great example of that. It's just one of the little hyperlinks in a network. Another person who's phenomenal at this as well and well known for deploying this play is Nick Mehta over at Gainsight. But I think if you put the customer at the center and you think about that customer and what the potential hyperlinks are around them for things that are near them, a good example of that would be, do you have moving champions? Do you have people who were a buyer over here? And also this is important, right? Because you can have a buyer and you can have a user, right? You can have a buyer who's involved in the purchasing workflow or decision or whatever, and you can have users, and they're actually both kind of useful to track depending on the scale of your solution. But as an example, use Atrium, we substantially track the movements of our champions and our former customers. And so when that CRO lands at a new spot, or when that VP of RevOps lands at a new spot, because those are primarily our personas from a purchasing standpoint, we're sure as heck engaging them, do a little champagne play. Hey, congratulations, let's send you a bottle of champagne. They're probably not, the first order of business is probably not, buying or opening up a new opportunity for sales performance management, but it might be their third priority, and it might be something
So,
that's relevant to them 90 days in. So you got to do that. And if you're not tracking the movements of your former buyers, and you're not
1,000%.
like, you got to get on that.
But here's the thing I would say, timing wise, think about not sending the bottle of champagne day one, and make sure that person isn't sober or sober curious, right?
Right.
Because, and you don't know that, but everything's about alcohol in our profession. And I quit drinking 9 years ago. And, I said the 3 C's of events for me are content, connections, and cocktails. And when I quit drinking, I'm like, oh shit, I need a C. I need another C. And so it was, I
Mocktail,
also,
big C.
I would say coffee, because coffee's for connectors, not closers. Coffee for connectors. And then I would also say chocolate, because once I quit drinking, I become a sugar like
Oh
fiend.
yeah. I
Sugar
I
fiend.
I love it. Or cookies,
Or
right?
cookies.
So
Cookies.
whatever it is. So this
But
is
here,
another thing.
the second point on that was the timing of that, of whatever it is you send. Everyone that's using Atrium, they're probably sending it right away because they know and they're tracking it. How about 90 days in? You send them maybe some Advil or some whatever it is to fix the stomach, the heartburn, because they were
Well,
sold
Tums.
the Tums. They were sold this great culture and this awesome round of funding and this great team. And then 90 days in, they're like,
Oh
this
boy,
is not
reality is set in.
exactly. And that's when you actually send it, because everybody's in the congratulations. How about listen, Eloqua Marketo, if you're drowning in a pit of Oracle shit, if you're drowning in a pit, then it's time to Eloquit. And Marketo is here to rescue you. And like that life preserver, right? The life preserver and that ring, and we'll toss it out and we're gonna rescue you and we're gonna pull you back from the drowning pit of aura shit. It's things like that. I'm a sales professional trapped in a marketer's body. I can't help myself.
Yeah. So with respect to user tracking or user movements, I think the important thing to remember for folks is, one, watching the movements of your champions, right? Also, secondarily, watching the movement of your users,
Yeah.
and like, so use Atrium as an example. Organizations, we might engage with the CRO or the VP of RevOps, the VP of enablement for a sales cycle, but there might be like 20 managers within an organization that were never involved in the sales motion, but they're users, right? And so when that person lands and becomes a director of sales over here or VP of sales over here, we want to track that person. So not only are we tracking our buyers, we're also tracking our users, and not only are we doing that from a pipe gen standpoint. If you want to get really advanced, you kind of keep an eye on people moving into your existing customers and also into your ops. Like, you might have an open op and somebody kind of shifts in there. So there's a couple different permutations of that. The other thing in terms of customers that are near to you, so like one thing is like near to you, they're prior buyers, they're prior champions, they're prior users, et cetera, et cetera. But then there's also people who are engaging with you, like engaging with your content and engaging with content that's pertinent to you, like intent. And I feel that organizations, like Sixth Sense has done a really good job of popularizing, and I think the phrase that they use is operationalizing intent. But there's also all sorts of other places where intent lives, and I think that, like, historically people thought of kind of intent silos, if you will. Like, you had product-led intent behavior over here. Somebody, like an organization, downloaded your PLG product or what have you, and then you had your first party intent where someone downloaded a white paper, filled a form, et cetera, et cetera. And then there was like third party intent stuff, like someone's on G2 looking at different things, somebody's surging on. And I think that one kind of big thing for folks to think about is the merging of those different signals together in order to really indicate, hey, this is an organization that cares about this right now, especially when you have enterprise sales or like enterprise customers who they're not gonna just buy something for shits and giggles. It's got to be a top 3 initiative for them. So if you have people who have, like if you have users who are goofing around with like, self-install or what have you from a PLG standpoint, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's like a corporate initiative around XYZ, like whatever it is that your solution solves. But if that's happening and there's content consumption happening and there's third-party intent happening, if all those then that indicates that there's an opportunity for us to really put a lot of wood behind this arrow, but versus just like, doing it individually.
I don't disagree, but I think that where's the differentiation in all of that? Sure, putting it all together, but how about what we're not talking about? How about what about signals that are coming from your partners? So, and nobody's doing this. And this is why I didn't want to do the social selling renaissance conversation, because that was what I was talking about back in 2012, 2013, 2014, 16, 17. A lot of it is still relevant, no question about it. But let's look around the corner and let's actually talk about what people aren't doing, what isn't the best practice right now, what is hard, right? That is more of a longer term. And all of that is to be true, Pete. I'm not taking away from any of that. Here's the thing though. The intent, if you have a partner, tech partner, and they close a deal in a account where you have an open opportunity, this partner has closed a deal, you have an open opportunity, that is a signal that you want to follow up with. You want to know, okay, you want to know what else is on their list of things that they have to tackle, right? So tell me who made the decision, who was the detractor. Tell me what their budget looks like. Why don't we go get some intel and some influence and maybe even some intros from these tech partners, service partners that you already have these joint value proposition, these case studies that show. HubSpot has a stat. It's when they have a customer who has 10 or more integrations from their app ecosystem, those customers don't churn.
Oh, yeah.
And so it would behoove HubSpot, and they are doing this, to make sure that their customers are aware of these app partners and the integrations that could make the solution not just stickier, but how about more valuable for the customer? How about less friction, less disconnected silos of data, right? So we have this untapped source of data, and this is why I did advisory work for Reveal. Reveal created the Nearbound category. So it's why I did advisory work for Reveal, because I was so hot and excited about this new set of data that we could operationalize to be able to see signals that nobody else has today. And so this is where Nearbound and ecosystem-led growth and this thing called second-party data, it's salespeople being able to look at you're basically account mapping. You're seeing, okay, this is an open opportunity and it's a customer of my partner. Oh, awesome. You're seeing it in real time. You're not having to go to the bar and take a screenshot of someone's Excel spreadsheet that they exported out of their CRM system that they're not supposed to be sharing with you. And guess what? That goes out of date pretty damn quickly, and the reps change and the territories change. And so like products like Crossbeam and Reveal, they actually give you, and I'm not involved anymore, so I'm not trying to pitch product, and I'm not even saying that they're going to win, but that there is going to be someone who develops that software, If Crossbeam and Reveal can't figure it out, like there is an opportunity there to give salespeople insight into the accounts that they're working, that there are partners that already have the trust and influence, and that this is this Nearbound extended and more like focused on this untapped opportunity to partner with partners.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think kind of in summary here, like we obviously, I think a really big insight here that I'd love for folks to take away is that when the best practice becomes highly deployed, right? The problem is that as marketers and sellers, just go to market people, we kind of have to zig when everyone else is zagging because you're going to get channel saturation and as a result, whenever, and it's going to be whatever it is, right? It was sales engagement, it was SEO, inbound, etc. So then where is their new sources of signal? Where is their new set? And so I think the big thing there is there's those who are near to the customer, and then there's the customers that are already near to you. And I think kind of in summary there, the folks who are near to your customer that are maybe like newer, it's the members of their community, right? How can you engage with their communities, get your customers into their communities, speak singing your gospel? How can you engage with those communities members from a sponsorship standpoint? There's using these networks, right, like social networks like LinkedIn, to be near, so you can be near to your customer, commenting on their posts or sending them content not about sales but about their topics like HR or security or what have you, getting expert yourself so you can be authoritative and engaging with those folks such that you're in the conversation, and then opportunities derive from that. And then I think the other set of people who are near to your customers are these partners who have historically, it's been a lot kind of higher friction in order to interact with these partners, whereas now we have new tooling that makes it such that you can merge CRMs and so on and so forth. And because of the proliferation of the revenue stack, and not just the revenue stack, but also because of the proliferation of like SaaS in general, there's a lot more like integrations that have to happen, which then facilitates more partners, right? Whether it's an HR implementation partner or like whatever, right? So there's more of these partners running around, and they have insight into these things. So to the extent that you can leverage them being close to the customer in order for you to get in there, that can be a very powerful thing. And then the second piece of it is which of the customers are near to you, and I think that those are things like your customers who are moving out of companies that are already customers of yours, right, moving to other organizations, and then also those who are engaging in who are demonstrating intent, whether it's third party intent or first party intent, leveraging that. So you can grab these folks who are either A, your customers are near to them, or B, they're near to you, and rather than being purely cold in your outreach, and which is obviously at this point an extraordinarily low conversion rate. I think those were the major things that we covered.
I think that's awesome, and I think I would just say back to, it is a war on attention, your buyer's attention. We are in a crisis of trust. And so how do you earn trust? Through proximity, and who is nearest to your customer or anyone else that you're trying to get the attention of, and leveraging this proximity based trust. There has to be value, and to deliver value, you have to major in customer, because you need to deliver what the customer values. And so I think that what you have shared, Pete, is absolutely spot on. and we need to do a better job at operationalizing all of this stuff,
Mhm.
right? And this is where don't have a Frankenstack. Go
Mhm.
back and figure out what is in your tech stack and what's being used and what's not integrated or interoperable. But yeah, I mean, look, it's tough times out there. There's too much tech.
Mhm.
I blame the VCs. Uh, yeah, and just by the way, too, my my Jill Raleigh go to market advisor and LP Stage Two Capital. You guys told me you were changing that to something else. I don't remember what it was, but
SaaS Queen. She's the SaaS Queen. Wonderful. Well, we have to wrap here, but Jill, really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us today. And I think the big takeaway here that we have is like seek to be near to your customer and seek to like engage with the customers that are near you. So, folks, thanks for joining us at the the MSP Sales Excellence Summit. And Jill, I'll see you soon. Okay.
yeah, I'm going to be near to you for the rest of our careers.
Okay. I'll see you, Jill. Take care.